Mirror's Edge is a really interesting and really divisive game. Although you play it from the first-person perspective, it's not really about shooting like so many other first-person games are, as much as it is about moving through the environment using crazy acrobatic skills. The game is at its best when you're just fluidly moving through the environment, hopping over obstacles, dodging guards, and just moving fast. The problem is the game regularly throws really precarious jumping puzzles at you and sequences where you're forced to fight your enemies, and it grinds the whole game to a halt. This kind of flies in the face of the whole idea of parkour, and it ends up hurting the game dramatically.
Once the city used to pulse with energy, dirty and dangerous, but alive and wonderful. Now, it's something else.
Mirror's Edge takes place in a near-future, dystopian, glass and steel, daily city. This is a place where communication is highly regulated, and anyone that doesn't agree with kind of the corporate state uses people called runners, which are basically on-foot couriers, to travel their information. You'll play as Faith, one of these runners, who ends up getting involved in this political assassination plot along with her sister. The game concerns itself more with kind of the procedural aspects of solving this mystery than it is with kind of fleshing out the world in general. And as such, there's a little bit of a disconnect between the story and what you're doing. You don't really need to know what's going on in order to progress in the game. Faith's mobility is absolutely her biggest asset. The basic controls in the game feel like your usual first-person game. However, all of her jumping and ducking abilities are mapped to 2 buttons. She can go up or go down, and depending on the context of the situation, she'll perform different moves. She can leap over gaps, climb over obstacles, slide under barriers, run along walls, and at a certain point you learn that you can start combining these abilities into more complicated advanced maneuvers like the L jump, where you run up a wall, quickly turn around, and leap up over to a higher platform. None of this stuff is really anything that you haven't seen in games that are played from the third-person perspective, but playing from the first person really has a great immersive quality. There will come a point in Mirror's Edge where you do have to fight, and Faith does have a few tricks up her sleeve in regards to this. She can disarm her enemies and grab their guns, or knock them down with a few punches and then pick up their guns off the ground. And she can use those for as long as there's bullets in them, but once she runs out, she discards them, and you're back to just running. The thing about the combat is that Faith is not particularly tough, and after maybe 2 punches or a couple of shots from a gun, you're going to be down on the ground. So for the most part, it's best off to avoid combat. However, there are points where you can't, and this is one of the problems with Mirror's Edge. Whenever you are faced with a group of enemies, it can just be really frustrating and just require a lot of trial and error to figure out how to progress through that section. Same thing goes for a lot of the jumping puzzles. You might be running along rooftops and just have a lot of really good forward momentum, and then you'll find yourself at a spot where you're not really sure where to go. The game is really good, for the most part, at giving you clues as to where you need to go next. There's the runner's vision, which paints objects in the environment in the color red, kind of giving you a good idea of where your path should be. And at any time, you can hold down one of the buttons and it'll kind of lock on to where you need to go next. The problem is that when this stuff doesn't work, it's just maddening. You feel so stuck, and it's impossible to tell where you need to go next. These jumping puzzles also kind of reveal the limitations of the first-person perspective. Not being able to see your character's body all the time can make it really difficult to time your jumps, and as such, again, you're going to be doing a lot of trial and error trying to figure out just the right timing to do it. And a lot of the times when you finally do pull it off after trying, maybe a dozen times, it's hard to tell what it was that you did different to make a successful jump versus a failed jump. One thing that can't be denied is that Mirror's Edge has a really striking visual style. Right now people are complaining a lot about all these brown games, and Mirror's Edge is the antithesis of this. Everything is really brightly lit and oversaturated. You have a lot of really high contrast color schemes that just make it a great game to look at. You spend a lot of your time on rooftops, and after a while you kind of start seeing the same object getting recycled over and over again. But it actually has a pretty good variety to the environments that you'll run through.
We call ourselves runners. We exist on the edge, between the gloss and the reality. The mirror's edge.
Mirror's Edge is full of some really exhilarating moments. When it lets you just keep your momentum and you're moving through the environment and you have that sense of speed and that great sense of danger, there's nothing else really quite like it. At the same time, there are so many just really frustrating moments where you're trying to do the same thing over and over again that it saps a lot of that energy. I got to give props to Digital Illusions for trying something different. You know, there's not a lot of games out there like this, and even with its problems, it's a really unique experience.
Once the city used to pulse with energy. Dirty and dangerous, but alive and wonderful. Now, it's something else. The changes came slowly at first. Most didn't realize, or didn't care, and accepted them. They chose a comfortable life. Some didn't.